Have you ever really thought about your social media feed? I mean, it's not just a list of posts, right? It's this gigantic, tangled web of friends and likes and shares. Now, try to imagine analyzing that whole web for 1 billion people. It's a staggering amount of data, way too big for any single computer to handle. So how in the world do we make sense of it all? Trying to map out all the connections between 1 billion people, it's like trying to download the entire internet onto your phone. It's just not going to happen. And it's not just about how much data there is. It's about that incredibly complex web of relationships. So where do you even begin to study something so vast and interconnected? To answer that, we first have to get our heads around the scale of the problem we're up against. It's not just big, it's mind-bogglingly complex. And, this isn't just a social media thing. Whether you're a data scientist looking at user behavior or a biologist mapping out how proteins interact, you're dealing with these massive web-like structures. In the data world, we call these things graphs, basically a whole bunch of dots connected by lines, representing everything from people to proteins. The only way to even attempt to tackle a graph with billions of connections is to slice it into pieces and spread the work across a whole network of computers. They all chip in and work on it together. But here's the real challenge. How do you slice it up in a way that's actually helpful? And that brings us right to the heart of what we're talking about today, the art and science of splitting these massive data graphs. The fancy term for this is graph partitioning, but really all it means is taking all the individual dots in our giant graph and assigning them to different teams, creating smaller, more bite-sized subgraphs for each computer to work on. Let's make this way simpler. Imagine you're a teacher with a massive class, and you need to break them into smaller groups for a big project. You wouldn't just do it randomly, would you? No way. You'd have some specific goals in mind. And that little classroom analogy perfectly nails the two huge challenges here. First, you want the teams to be roughly the same size so the workload is balanced. You can't have one computer sweating while the others are just chilling. Second, and this is the really tricky part, you want to minimize the chatter between teams. In graph terms, that means keeping connected points, the friends, in the same group. Because see, every connection you cut forces two different computers to talk to each other, and that communication is what slows the whole process down to a crawl. So balancing team size while keeping friends together is a tough problem, but a recent paper proposes this really clever solution, and it's inspired by how we organize ourselves in the real world. The algorithm is called Graph, that's Graph, and it takes a surprisingly intuitive approach. Instead of starting randomly, it actually looks for the natural gathering places within the data, kind of like how people gather in real life. This quote right here is the big aha moment. The researchers were inspired by a study about people's travel patterns. They realized you could map a city by building regions around popular locations or hotspots, like a coffee shop or a gym. Graph applies this exact same idea to data. Find the most popular hubs in the network and build your partitions around them. So how does it actually work? Well, it's basically a 3-step process. First, Graph uses a technique to find the most tightly knit social circles in the graph. Think of cliques where everyone knows everyone, and stars with one super popular person at the center. Second, it identifies the single most connected individual in each of those groups. That is the hotspot. And finally, it uses these hotspots as seeds, growing the partitions outwards until the entire graph is divided up. Pretty smart, right? It's a really elegant idea for sure, but does it actually work any better than the methods we already have? Well, the researchers put it to the test. They put GraphP in the ring against an established high-quality algorithm called METIS. This is considered an industry standard, so it's a very tough competitor. So this is the moment of truth. Does this simple, real-world idea of starting from popular centers actually lead to better partitions? Does it really keep more friends together on the same team? And wow, the results are pretty striking. This chart shows the number of exterior edges. That's just a technical way of saying the connections that were cut between partitions. You want this number to be as low as possible. As you can see, Graph, the red line, is consistently way lower than METIS, the blue line. That means way fewer cut connections and a whole lot less communication overhead. That's a huge win. And check this out. Here's the other side of the coin. This chart shows the total number of connections that were just lost in the process. And again, Graph H in red loses far, far fewer connections than METIS in blue. This is a really big deal. It means its partitions are a much more accurate, more faithful reflection of the original data. So Graphitch makes cleaner cuts and loses less information. Okay, that's a nice technical win, but what does it actually mean in the real world? It all comes together in this awesome chain of benefits. You start intelligently with hotspots, which leads to creating way better partitions. Those better partitions mean less communication between computers, and less communication means more efficient computation. The bottom line, you get your answers, your insights, much, much faster. And that's why this matters so much. I mean, the amount of data in the world is just exploding. As our data graphs get bigger and more complex, having smarter, more intuitive ways to partition them is absolutely essential for making progress in everything from drug discovery to building the next generation of AI. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? The winning idea here wasn't some impossibly complex mathematical formula, but a simple observation about how people gather in the real world. It just leaves us with a fascinating question. What other elegant, real-world analogies are just waiting to be applied to our most complex digital problems?